All right, welcome to my, I think this is my fourth live Mokume Gane Q&A today. And this one is going to be a little bit different than the other ones. I will be talking more about the history of Mokume Gane and showing examples of work made throughout time with the Mokume Gane process. I'll be focusing more on metalwork than I will on jewelry and rings, mostly because I do a lot of rings, and so I find that it's not as interesting. So we'll be looking more at the larger pieces. But I think that if you're watching this and you don't have much experience or knowledge of Mokume Gane, that's fine, because I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, and you'll leave with an understanding of where it came from, what it's made of, who's making stuff with it. And that sort of thing. I think it'll be really fun. If you all are already a Mokume Gane aficionado, maybe you make it, maybe you sell things made out of it, this will still be interesting because it will give some context, and maybe you'll learn about some history or some makers that you don't know about. I'll also say that this is a very subjective number of slides of current makers and what they're doing in the field. So if you're a Mokume Gane maker in the field and watching this, please don't feel sad if I didn't put your slide in. It's really just kind of random. So don't be sad. There's so much work. There's so much great work out there. I couldn't put everybody's work in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So here we are, starting off with the beginnings of Mokume Gane, and I have two pieces that were made in the Edo period. The piece on the right is actually, forgive my pronunciation, Japanese folks, kozuka, a little handle for a knife. And it was made by one of our earliest known Mokume Gane makers, Shoame Denbei. And again, forgive the pronunciation. And so this piece on the right was made in the early 1600s. And how exciting is that we can look at that piece, and it honestly looks like a piece of Mokume that I myself might have made last week, or one of my students. I mean, it's a very good piece, but it also is very similar to what we make today. Excuse me, I'm just making sure everybody's joining us, and I'm hearing a little bit of noise, so I'm just muting to make sure we don't have noise. Okay. That piece on the right, I'll try not to go too much into technique, but I can't help it because that's just who I am. There's a little bit of a twist going on in that piece on the right. And then the piece on the left, I'm sorry, I've forgotten where it came from, but it is Edo period. And I like to show it just as an example of the name Mokume Gane means wood eye metal if you translate it literally, but normally when we translate it to English, we say wood grain metal. And you can see in this example how much the patterning of Mokume can look like wood grain. And certainly this artist, and of course the object on the left is a suba, or sword guard. And this was one of the first these were one of the first types of objects that were used, that were made out of Mokume starting in the 1600s and going up until about the 1850, which is the end of the Edo period in Japan. So in that period, that's basically what Mokume was most used for, were for these sword guards. And over time, they began to be used for some other things, but sword furniture, the two, just like the two objects that you're seeing here, were the main things. So from there, I'll take you to the present day. I just wanted to show this one process slide for anyone watching who doesn't know what Mokume Gane is. It is a technique, not a material. So it's a technique of layering different colors of metal together and fusing them with time, heat, and pressure. We're seeing those different stripes there. That is a billet of nickel and copper. So it can be squeezed down, and the two metals are fused together and can be worked as one material. The lines are parallel as you see them now. So if you saw it on the top view, you would just see one metal. So the big draw for Mokume Gane artists is how to deform and abrade the surface of a billet like that to create patterns as we look at it on the top surface. So that's just a little glimpse into what it is, how it's made, and then we'll go on to talk more about finished examples. So from the Edo period in Japan, there was a time where Mokume Gane kind of fell out of favor. They were recovering from the war. There wasn't a lot going on, but this fellow, Mr. Norio Tamagawa, actually kind of revived Mokume Gane. He even learned a lot of it from books. So he's actually the modern father of Mokume Gane starting in the in the 60s and 70s. So he learned a lot from books that had been written down in history and really revived the art of Mokume Gane. He's a living treasure in Japan. He is still living too, in his late 70s now, and still raising vessels made with Mokume Gane. For those of you that have done raising, you'll see that in Japan, they raise, in the West, we would call it backwards, and also understand that the thickness of the material. He likes to raise with material that's no thinner than 2 millimeters. In fact, usually it's 3 millimeters. And so I think he's quite an inspiration. I hope to be raising 3 millimeter thick vessels when I'm in my late 70s. It hasn't happened. Can't do it now. Maybe I'll be able to do it later. So he makes incredible work. And here are a few of his finished objects. His vessels are large. This is 12, 14 inches high. And there is a video that he made, I think called Tenkin, which is like a hammering, that shows how he makes these vessels. And I can tell you, for those that know a little about the technique and are curious, he doesn't just pattern the discs and then raise a patterned disc. He does a lot of patterning as he's raising. So he'll pattern a little bit, then he'll raise a little bit, and then he'll chisel to create pattern, and then he'll planish it back smooth, even though it's already a bowl-shaped or vessel-shaped object, and continue on, so that the raising and the patterning happen together. And it's really fascinating. And there's a lidded vessel by him as well. We haven't talked much about materials yet, but this is probably fine silver, copper, and shakudo or kuroshibuichi being the black. Okay, so Mr. Tamagawa is over there in Japan making incredible Mokume Gane work. And then Hiroko Sato comes on the scene. She's a younger generation than Mr. Tamagawa, a little bit younger, and she met Eugene Pijanowski here in the US in 1968, I think, at Cranbrook. They were both getting their masters, and they met and married and began a 40-year partnership where they learned a lot about Mokume Gane, they taught, they made work together. So it's actually somewhat difficult to talk about, to find work that only has one name attached to it, but they did separate later. So this is a piece by Hiroko Sato-Pijanowski, made only about 10 years ago, or maybe only 5 years ago. She works a lot in the Japanese tradition, where she comes up with the plan for the object and she directs different subcontractors, you could call them. So the person who patterned this Mokume did it at her direction, and then she took the patterned disc of Mokume and took it to a spinner to have it shaped into this cake server. So in this way, she's able to continue to make work even though her arms can't raise anymore. So she can make, this is a 12-inch wide finished piece. Here is the only picture I could find of something by Eugene Pijanowski that just had his name on it. He's retired to Hawaii. They both taught in Michigan for many years, but he's retired to Hawaii and he still does artwork, but it's not so much Mokume Gane anymore. But I found this example on his website. So it looks like a scanned slide from the 80s. You can see that yellowed background, but caption down the bottom will show you 9 by 8 inches in diameter. That's a pretty good sized piece of mokume. And I know, looking at that pattern, how difficult it is to get that particular pattern. So this shows quite mastery of the technique of Mokume Gane. So the two of them, Jean and Hiroko, they went and studied in Japan under Mr. Tamagawa and learned his secrets, his research that brought Mokume Gane back to life. And then they moved back to the US and taught in Michigan for decades. And that's what really started the Western resurgence of Mokume Gane, because they taught people that then went on to other art schools around the US. And that's how, specifically in the US, Mokume Gane was disseminated from the 70s on. So a lot of the folks that are making Mokume Gane now learned it from either Jean and Hiroko, or someone who taught Jean and Hiroko. Or someone who Jean and Hiroko taught, excuse me. So that's kind of like the history of how it really got a foothold in the US. And then here are some people that also, I don't actually know the history of Alistair MacCallum and where he learned to do mokume. I would love to meet him and ask him that. But there are a couple of UK artists that are in this generation that I want to mention. So first, these gorgeous little sake cups or flutes that we're looking at here. Beautiful, probably chisel work. And a second slide by him, business card cases. I'm beginning to understand a little better how these were made, but I still don't know how he got that blue patina, which I think is really fabulous. I think it might have something to do with aluminum, but I'm not sure, and ammonia. So really technical mastery, amazing stuff. And moving forward in history, I actually don't know for sure, but I think Wayne Meeten is younger than Alistair MacCallum. So hopefully I'm not offending anyone when I say that. This isn't very old work by Wayne Meeten. His work now is I mean, this is spectacular enough, but his work now is like beyond amazing. He doesn't do mokume as much anymore. He does a single alloy raising, and you should check out, so that when you see here on the upper left hand corner the @ sign, that's Instagram. So you should check out his Instagram at Wayne Meeten. He's often busy off accepting rewards in grand halls in London. I mean, he's really top-notch maker. And this piece I show specifically because it inspired me to become a better patterner with the mokume, to move past just like drilling holes in it or drilling depressions and bashing them back flat. I saw this specificity of the like little starfish shapes and these little dots that had narrow lines and lots of detail, and then this background of the broader pattern. And I thought, well, how is he doing that? And it just spurred me on to learn more about patterning. So I like to show that. There's another piece by him. I saw this in a museum somewhere in the UK. I've forgotten where now, but just in large, and it's a good size. It's maybe 14 inches or something. Again, the precision of it spurred me on to know that I could make my patterning better as well. All right, and now moving on to the US. So here is a piece by Jim Binnion, and you can also check out his Instagram there up in the upper left. And he's certainly probably one of, I would say, our most famous US Mokume Gane person. I think he is in his 60s now, and not certainly, I think he would say this himself, he's always been more interested in research than making finished things. He's very technical and geeky in that way. And this teapot was definitely a tour de force of technique. He's also written a great book on metal alloys. I highly recommend it. So he definitely is a metallurgist as well as a Mokume Gane artist. Right. And Marvin Jensen, I don't know a lot about him, but this vessel is just amazing. The size at which he patterned and the control to create that pattern on a raised vessel is really amazing. I believe he's associated with Penland and spent a lot of time as a resident there. And I think he's about of an age with James Binnion, maybe, but I'm not sure. And then I wanted to just share a few names that I may not have finished work to show you by them, but they're mostly because they're more authors than, or maybe the one reason to mention them is because of the books they've authored rather than their finished work. And so Masaki Takahashi wrote this book that you see here, the textbook of Mokume Gane. And how wonderful it is that it's been translated into English now. You don't know how many Mokume Gane makers, myself and many, probably you guys in the audience too, included, that poured through trying to understand just by looking at the pictures of the Japanese one. But now it's available in English as well from Amazon. You should get it. James Binnion, of course, wrote the metallurgy book and many, many papers that you can access through the Santa Fe Symposium. Google that Santa Fe Symposium. Chris Plouffe, business partner with James Binnion, they often team teach Mokume Gane. Chris Plouffe has also written many papers that you can access through the Santa Fe Symposium. Steve Midgett, also a big author. He wrote the Mokume Gane, a comprehensive study, and and also Mokume Gane for the small shop. So he's written a few Mokume Gane books that have really helped disseminate the knowledge of Mokume all over the world. He also has his book pretty much free online now. Google his name plus Mokume Gane, you'll find it. And what else was I going to say about him? Forgot. Darn. Okay, Ian Ferguson. I forget if he's Australian. I think he's Australian, and he wrote a wonderful book. You can just see it right here. It's a smaller book, a little green on the end, and it's a really great book. It's out of print. If you can find it, grab it. But it's interesting. It has, I think it was written a couple of decades ago, and we have changed some of the ways that we're fusing Mokume now. The most specific one I'll say, and this would be very useful for those of you that are listening that fuse your own Mokume using Ian Ferguson's book. He uses a soak time in a kiln of like 6, 8, 10, 12 hours. And subsequent research done by Binnion and lots of people, certainly myself, have found you don't need to soak them in the kiln that long. It's not necessary. So save your energy bills, and you really 2 hours is plenty of time to be soaking your billets. But still, he came first, and he did all this research. So it's a really useful book. Then Phillip Baldwin, of course, is the maker of most of the fused Mokume that you can buy here in the US without having to fuse it yourself. He has a company called Shining Wave Metals, and most of his Mokume is sold wholesale directly through Reactive Metals. So if you buy Mokume Gane from Reactive Metals, Phillip Baldwin made it, or it was made, or his assistant made it. And he also has some excellent free patterning guides on the Reactive Metals website. So reactivemetals.com, you should go there and check that out. And then Bob Coogan, I added him as well. He did at least one of the chapters in Steve Midgett's books. Steve Midgett's book is great in that it has chapters on the different ways to fuse Mokume Gane, because of course you can fuse by solid state or liquid state diffusion bonding. There's also the TEMT way of fusing. So he had authors come in and write different chapters for him. And Bob Coogan wrote one of those chapters. And Bob Coogan has also been a Mokume maker for many years and makes great stuff. So just some authors. And now we can go on to looking. Now we're moving forward in time and looking at makers that are maybe the second generation or third, actually maybe third or fourth generation. And here is one, Annie Kagabere. She studied for a little while with Mr. Tamagawa. I don't know for how long, and made this vessel. And now she's working in Estonia and doesn't make mokume as much anymore, at least not that I see on social media. But I just really liked this piece of hers, chisel patterned, probably patterned when flat and then raised, angle raised to create that vessel. And then Susa Makoto, again, pardon the pronunciation. I don't know Susa, but he's on social media. You can find him at Susa Makoto 1975. And I've got a few different images by him. I love this one because it just shows a great technical idea of taking your Mokume Gane, and that's not just inlay, that's marriage of metals. So if you picked it up, I'm pretty sure, if you picked it up and look at the other side, you would also see that same pattern. And that shows quite a mastery of soldering to not overheat that metal when you're doing a marriage of metals. Once that's done, then you still have to fabricate the whole box. So I just am quite impressed with the technical mastery of soldering when I see that. Here's another piece by him I could not resist. How adorable is that? That is his thumb. He did these little miniature mokume vessels. And here's a little pipe or a kisaru by him. And yeah, check out his Instagram. You can see all the tools that he's using to make these. Really quite impressive, and a traditional format of mokume for in Japan. And here's someone whose work I really admire, Ryuhei Sako. Just really amazing mastery of fusing. So sure, he can ray, and sure, he can pattern, but he can also plan a billet out so that he can control what colors you're seeing in what part of the vessel. So down here, this is not just one color, it's actually still quite detailed patterned mokume, but it's silver and very high percentage shibuichi. So like 40%, 30%, probably 20%, so that the patination gives it that really light gray color. And then deeper in the billet, I think, are layers where the copper he starts layering copper in as well. So if you fuse your own mokume, you can start thinking about doing that. And a lot of us are trying to get that figured out, to plan our billet stacks so that we get this amazing effect. And here's another piece by him, chisel patterned, of course. And yeah, I just really appreciate the mastery of his work. He has a nice book out too. You could Google his name and see if it's possible to get one of these, but I don't know. I think it's self-published, and I don't know if it's possible to get more of them. But it's a fantastic book. But he actually has most of his work is really accessible online through Instagram. All right. And there's another fellow's work that I don't actually know what if his name is Osukchun or if that's just a handle, because I don't know Korean. So I apologize if I'm, that's not your name. I have no idea, but his work is great. Again, someone I really respect his ability to solder with the mokume, because of course you have to be very careful with your temperatures and not overheat the mokume, because you can ruin it the very last solder join. So the technical mastery at making this teapot is just really impressive. I love his work. Right. And now on to someone closer to me. This is work by Francesca Urciuoli. She came and apprenticed in my studio for about 6 months in I think that was 2016. And she learned how to make mokume from me and then just raced on from there. So her work is really original. This is a bracelet where the technique we're seeing is mostly guri-bori. So carving in, but not flattening back down. It's a rather labor intensive process because you have to go in and polish all those valleys and dents without the ease of being able to just sand it one surface. But impressive work. You can check out her Instagram there now. Here's another piece by her. This is older work by her, but she makes a lot of new things too. Bracelet where the patterning is just really interesting and unique. The texture surface that you see here, she's actually using a graver that's common in her home country of Italy. And a liner, I think. I've forgotten what it's called, darn it. But it makes a surface that looks like textile almost. Really amazing stuff. All right, and a pair of earrings by Francesca. So she actually has a shop now in Berlin called What If, and you can go check out her jewelry there and even take classes with her there in Berlin. And here in the US, David Huang and David Barnhill. So this piece is a collaboration. It's David Huang that does the raising and David Barnhill that does the mokume and the patterning. David Barnhill does his own work as well of mokume and raising as well. But this piece is a collaboration. And yeah, really nice, large patterning there. It shows probably patterning thicker. And so you get fewer layers revealed, but you get really bold patterns. And here, so it's a little bit random. We're just bopping around, but this is Earl Bushey. This is a fellow who taught me mokume, actually. And he was taught by Toshi Kawai, which means that I didn't learn mokume from that tree of Mr. Tamagawa and then the Pijanowskis and then teachers. I learned it from Earl, who learned it from Toshi. And I did learn a little bit from Toshi, but mostly from Earl. And I like this piece because of the simplicity of it and the restraint. It isn't easy once you've fused a whole mokume billet, you kind of want to fill the whole thing with pattern. It takes quite a bit of restraint, just a little bit of patterning. So I respect this piece a lot for that. See, and another piece by Earl, this shell, just showing the beautiful colors of silver and then high percentage shibuichi with a lighter gray, and then the black is either shakudo or kuro shibuichi, and the red is copper, and chisel pattern really nicely. Here's someone, James Viste. He's in the upper Midwest. I had a great conversation with him at SNAG in 2019 before the world blew up. And I love his work because, well, I love these pieces just for the restraint shown in them, and the energy and the interest of, well, so you can make mokume, so you can raise vessels in mokume. Well, but what are you going to do with it that says something, you know? So I think these brooches are just great, sort of like mitosis, like cells dividing. Really neat stuff. He fuses and forges large pieces of mokume and raises, and he teaches as well. Hiroko Yamada, she is also in the in the Midwest in Michigan. She has a gallery you can check out there. And she, besides her own work, is notable for organizing a show that happened in 2016 this catalog here, the North America Mokume Gane exhibit in Japan. So she organized a bunch of mokume artists that were American mokume artists, and had a show with them in Japan. And really beautiful, double patterned, but really done well, like roller printed dragonfly wings with, I think these are palladium white gold with silver. And then I really wanted to acknowledge something that I'm only just touching on a little bit here, but Mokume Gane is still used for sword furniture and weapons and all that, and blades. And because of its close association with Damascus steel. So the image that we're looking at here, of course, the blade is made with steel. So it's Damascus steel. And that process is a little bit different than Mokume Gane, but it's the same kind of idea of layering different alloys of material together and then having the pattern be revealed at the end. But of course, I've included it for the work that he's done on the bolsters here, the little decorative parts of the blade that is really top-notch Mokume Gane work. So there's a sort of crossover, and you can certainly find many knife makers and bladesmiths that use Mokume Gane in their work, but it's hard to find ones that do it as well as someone like Kevin Klein. He was taught, I believe, by J.D. Smith, who is another incredible bladesmith that uses Mokume Gane. And it's patterned. Some bladesmiths use Mokume Gane, but they don't really pattern it. They keep it straight layers, and then it depends on what relief carving, the shape that they're carving. They may be carving parts for the handles that are curved anyway, and so they're filed and shaped so that you see the pattern being revealed, but not intentionally patterning like you're seeing here with Kevin Klein. So it's a big world if you start going to look in the bladesmithing world and how it crosses over with Mokume Gane, but it's really neat to see. So he's standing in for many more bladesmiths that are using Mokume Gane in their work. And then Nicole, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name, sorry, but we include this. This was also in that show, that 2016 show in that went to Japan. This shows really interesting sort of forward-looking or technology-based. So this is actually planned and cut with 3D, with a computer, basically. So she planned that cut and programmed it in, and the Mokume Gane was actually cut for her, and that's pretty cool. So it's kind of like 21st century guribori, I suppose. Technically, it is guribori, but it's extremely precise because of the way it was created. But thought it's always cool to show. And then last but not least, I hope, I thought I'd show some of my own work, and then be thinking, if you have questions, I'd also love to answer some questions. So like I said, it was Earl Bushey that taught me how to make Mokume Gane, and this little tea container is one of my newest pieces, silver and copper, and chisel patterned, but with some drilling to create the dots. And this is silver and kuroshibuichi, vase, bud vase. I do a lot of rings, but I really like making the vessels, so I'm more highlighting the vessels here. This is a piece I made when Ford Hallam actually came out and taught a class in my studio in 2018, roundabout there. And the uchidashi, the Japanese technique of pushing down the metal. So it's technically chasing, not repoussé, although you repoussé once and then you chase, basically, but it's different, as Ford would say very strongly. It's not chasing and repoussé, but it's the same idea of pushing up and pushing down. And so I thought, well, let's try it on Mokume. And it's really fun, but it does mess the surface up. You can see that the patterning is quite indistinct because of how much the metal is being squished and moved around. And I don't think I would be able to even get below that turbulence. I'd have to really scrape and sand quite a bit, and I'm not sure that it would be useful, but it was a really neat project to do. Another piece, just raised silver and kuroshibuichi, chisel patterned. This piece is called Drifting, and it is basically a copper vessel with a mokume lid, chisel patterned, and the mokume is copper, silver, and kuro shibuichi. And there is the piece open. I really have a lot of interest in texture, so I don't want to leave a smooth, shiny surface. And I suppose that's partially out of laziness. You know, the more shiny and smooth the surface is, the more you're going to see a flaw. So I love highly textured surfaces, and you can see that here. And then I just thought I thought I would end by showing some of the rings that I do make. There's a pile of them here, and that's probably my bread and butter. It's probably about a third of what I do, a third vessels, a third teaching, and a third ring making. I really enjoy doing the rings. All of the rings that I make are made out of precious metals and silver. I don't use any high copper alloys in the rings or any patinas on the rings. So what you're looking at is the color of the metal. There's nothing to wear off. There's no patina to wear off. Right. And I like that this color combo is fun. It's 18 karat yellow, and then the dark gray is palladium, an alloy of palladium and silver, and really rich, gorgeous surface. But you can't etch this because there's no silver in it. It's the silver that etches. So it's the silver that allows me to create that 2-layer surface. And here's a pair of rings. There's not just one, there's 2 there. That twist pattern or star pattern that's done by twisting and then sawing in half is very popular and fun to do. And then I like more original commissions too. This lady came to me with these 2 very rare moissanites and said, I want you to make me comet rings. So I got to figure out how to make mokume rings that looked like comets. Yeah, it was really fun. And then this ring I actually made for Hiroko Sato-Pijanowski. So if you meet her, you might find it on her finger. And it is 14 karat rose gold, 18 karat yellow, and sterling silver. And technically was quite complex. It's 13 millimeters wide. She likes big jewelry. And is actually 2 twists, one twisted clockwise, the other one twisted anti-clockwise, and patterned similarly so I could book match them like that. So it was a fun technical challenge. And that's pretty much it for the presentation part.